everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. For those watching for the first time, welcome. My name is Dan Pardo, and this is the 20th episode of Pardo's Turn.
17, 18, 19, 20.
In this weekly Wednesday web series, I analyze a classic show tune from a music director's point of view, and with the help of a special guest, perhaps shed some light on what makes the gems of our musical theater canon so great. Today, I am happy to have on the show our first international guest, my dear friend Isaac Sutton, with whom I have music directed sold-out solo concerts at the Metropolitan Room and Feinstein's 54 Below. In his home city of Tel Aviv, Isaac has starred in productions of Company, 1776, and Romeo and Juliet, in addition to his busy concert schedule. So we thought, what better way to celebrate Broadway's international appeal than sing something from what's often touted as the world's most popular musical, Les Misérables. The mother of all 80s mega musicals, Les Mis, written by Alain Boublil and Claude Michel Schoenberg, the team that brought us Miss Saigon and The Pirate Queen, has been produced in at least 42 countries worldwide and translated into 21 different languages. The operatic score is chock full of recognizable tunes, from I Dreamed a Dream to Bring Him Home, On My Own to Master of the House, and while I would be very entertained to hear Isaac's rendition of Castle on a Cloud, we settled on Javert's signature soliloquy, Stars. The virtuous but rigid antagonist looks to the night sky to set up the metaphor for his musical thesis. Stars are orderly and just, predictable and all-knowing, in his words, silent and sure, keeping watch like sentinels in the night. And the musical introduction supports his description perfectly, twinkling in a high register and set evenly in 12/8 time. Despite all the trouble Valjean has given him, Javert remains cool and collected throughout the vocal, with faith that justice will prevail. The melody is mostly stepwise and straightforward, with a few leaps simply outlining the chords underneath. The chord progression, like the firmament Javert is describing, is dependable and easy to navigate, with diatonic chords built on familiar patterns like this descending bass line, or the good old 2, 5, 1. The two moments you'll find some chromaticism, or chords that don't fall within the given key signature, are during the dramatic phrases that begin, "But if you fall as Lucifer fell," which is a little on the nose, but effective nonetheless. During this same section, the steady compound meter gets interrupted with a stray bar of 6/8, which adds just a little bit more unrest before we return to the tranquility of the title subject. At the end of the second verse, we are greeted with a sudden key change as an instrumental feature. The lyric continues as a prayer. "Lord, let me find him, that I may see him." So perhaps the key change is God weighing in through some divine intervention. Or maybe just a final push for Javert, asserting that there is a second viable path for Valjean, where justice prevails and he serves the remainder of his sentence. In either case, Javert's path is clear. Whereas other songs or other characters might jump up to a high note at the end, he simply repeats Sol, the fifth scale degree, 6 times in a row. "This I swear by the stars." Like these celestial beings, he holds his course and his aim, always keeping watch in the night. Shalom.
Shalom, shalom.
How are you today, sir?
I'm very good.
So last week we had this concert at 54 Below, Broadway, Israel. Went really well, sold out, I was very happy. And it got me thinking, I've never done an international perspective on Pardo's Turn, and so much of musical theater, even though New York is the epicenter, it really goes all over the country and all over the world.
Right.
So you live in what, Tel Aviv, is that right?
I live in Tel Aviv, yeah.
So
Born and raised.
Is that, would you consider Tel Aviv to be kind of the most art center of Israel as far as...
Oh, absolutely. I think that's where, most of the theaters are based. The National Theater is there. This is where I do my shows. There's the Kamari Theater, Gesher Theaters. They're all based in Tel Aviv, and we tour the country. But the base is Tel Aviv.
Right. Do international touring companies come to Tel Aviv, or do you do your own in Hebrew or in Hebrew and English?
Right. So I would say every year the National Theaters produce their own musical theater shows, and they're done in Hebrew.
And that's
because that's the
things
native language.
like Casablanca and some of the other ones that
Right,
we've
but
done.
also if they bring, the Broadway shows, like My Fair Lady or Les Mis, Evita was recently done.
All in Hebrew.
All going to be in Hebrew just because that's the native language,
Yeah.
Sometimes they do bring international Broadway tours
Mm-hmm.
to Israel, and then of course, if it's a national tour, it's going to be, the original language.
Do you learn a lot of these musical theater songs in Hebrew, or do you learn them based off of recordings, or and have things like YouTube changed how international and Israeli performers consume musical theater?
Nowadays, everything is so much more accessible, thanks to YouTube. But acting schools in Israel, people do work still in Hebrew. But I guess I was very fortunate to be able to come here, and study at Manhattan School of Music and Circle of the Square.
What were some of the most memorable performances as a kid visiting New York that you've had the pleasure of seeing?
Oh my gosh. Well, I do remember seeing Cats, because that was the first musical that we ever saw. I remember going with my cousins, and I remember we sat at the mezzanine and there were some actors that were jumping at us. So that kind of stick in my head.
I had a similar experience. I think my second show that I saw was Lion King. My first one was Miss Saigon, which was amazing. But we were in the mezzanine for Lion King, and at the beginning of Act 2, all the people for One by One have the puppets of the birds swinging them around, and that was really special too.
It was special.
One of the most internationally renowned shows, I would say, is Les Mis, to the extent that there are dozens of variations of the logo depending on which country it was in. And you said in our last concert that Javert was one of your dream roles. What was the first time you saw Les Mis?
Well, the first time I saw Les Mis was in London. Probably 10 years ago or so. But it was only when the movie came out. I remember going with an Israeli conductor who was a good friend of mine, and as the song Stars started playing in the movie, he was like, oh, this is a good song for you, it could be a great role for you. And then I realized, if you're looking at the other characters, that's pretty much the only role that I guess is fit, just because I'm a bass baritone singer. As I said in my show, I'm always cast as either the bad guy, the killer, the murderer. What can I do? But I don't think he's that bad.
No, and that's the great thing about Javert. He's someone who's principled and kind of to a fault. But it's just one way of thinking about things, and then another way of thinking about things. And depending on what your philosophy is, they're both right. So. I think that makes it easier to play rather than one of these villains where you just kind of twirl your mustache and be evil.
And it is a great song to sing.
Absolutely. Have you worked on new musicals in Israel with Israeli composers, or?
No, not recently. The last musical that I was in was Romeo and Juliet, and that was a French production that they translated to Hebrew for the first time, and they brought it to Israel. And I played the priest, of course, the one who poisons poor Juliet. But again, it was fun because as a kid, I remember flying to Paris and seeing that production, and again, it was coming full circle. And here I was doing it in Hebrew in Israel, so that was very exciting.
So the show that we premiered last year was this Vegas-themed show.
Yeah.
You obviously have a history with that entertainment capital as well.
Well, I remember when I was in the Army, and then Barbra Streisand announced that she was going to do her very last show of her career. And I remember buying tickets, and I couldn't go because I was at the Army and they wouldn't let me go. And then my parents went, but I was so devastated because I thought, oh my gosh, she's like my favorite female singer, and I'm never going to be able to hear her sing again. But guess what? She kept singing.
Yes. As is usually the case.
Yeah, but so I didn't get to see her in Vegas. I saw her in New York several times, but I remember going, flying to Vegas and seeing Celine. She had a spectacle, with all these dancers, and that gave me the theme, and I was like, okay, well, I could, take, songs by Sinatra, which I love. My parents love Frank Sinatra. That's what I've been listening to, growing up.
Sure.
And Dean Martin, Elvis, so that gave me a theme for a show. and I've been actually doing it in Israel for more than a decade now.
Oh, wow.
Really.
So in that Vegas show, if I recall, you performed in English and Hebrew and Italian
And French.
Tell me about how you create your set lists and who you listen to from all over the world.
Oh, well, I got addicted to French in high school back in Israel because I went to a French high school.
Oh, okay.
It's called Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to take like 7 years of French. So that's how I was exposed to the language, and I fell in love with the language, and then I started really listening to a lot of French singers. We just lost Charles Aznavour, who I adored, and I actually saw him in Israel a few years ago, and this was a dream. But also Celine Dion. I've been following her French career. I actually much prefer her French repertoire rather than the English one. So anytime I get to sing in French, I mean that's a great treat. And
so you could have done that Romeo and Juliet in French if you'd like.
actually, I could have, and I think that would have been better. To be honest with you, I think we would have had more shows. They could have just had subtitles, or what do you call it, like
The super titles.
Yeah.
The other thing which I really find admirable to you is that you have a lot of chutzpah in terms of reaching out to performers that you love. And,
Yes.
so many times, people stand sheepishly by the stage door and either don't say anything or just silently, hand over a playbill. And you say in your show that we had last week that you saw this performance, and so you contacted the person and asked them to join you on stage, and they said yes. And
it's a small world. Everybody has an email address, and if not directly, you could reach out to an agent. You could reach out to a manager, and just if you don't ask, you can't get. Right?
Exactly.
Out in the darkness, a fugitive running, falling from God, fallen from grace. God be my witness, I never shall yield till we come face to face, till we come face to face. He knows his way in the dark, mine is the way of the Lord. Those who follow the path of the righteous shall have their reward. And if they fall as Lucifer fell to the flame of the sword, stars in your multitude, scarce to be counted, filling the darkness with order and light. You are the sentinels, silent and assured, keeping watch in the night, keeping watch in the night. You know your place in the skies, you hold your course and your aim, and each in your season returns and returns, and is always the same. And if you fall as Lucifer fell, you'll fall in flame. And so it must be, for so it is written on the doorway to paradise, that those who falter and those who fall must pay the price. Lord, let me find him, that I may see him, safe behind bars. I will never rest till then. This I swear by the stars.
So what shows do you have coming up, either in Israel or wherever?
Well, I'm still going to tour with Broadway Israel, obviously. and we have to figure out how to bring you to Israel.
Hey, make a date night there.
Also, I have a new show that we produced for Israel's 70th anniversary,
Oh, great.
which is called Israel Prize. And I don't know if you know this, but every year for our Independence Day, there's a very special ceremony, and they give out the Israel Prize. And sometimes they give it to composers and lyricists. So we decided to put on a show that's based on songs that have been written by Israel Prize winners in salute for the country. So we're going to start touring with that in a week.
Oh, great. If you like Isaac, please follow him on all his various social media and let him know when you're going to Israel to see a show. Until then, we will see you next Wednesday on Pardo's Turn. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share. We'll see you then.
This I swear by.